Okay, guys, welcome back. Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. Just going to get started in a couple seconds here. If you're here in the meeting, feel free to say hi. Hi, Nathan. Ryan, how's it going? Good to see you too. And hey, Stephen. Okay, guys, let me just get it underway. Thank you so much for being here again. I'll start off today by just going over a couple points about the schedule that we still have. First of all, we're totally on track. Everything's in line with the syllabus, so you'll see the same dates there that I'm going to talk about here, but pretty much we just have a couple class periods left. Today we're going to finish chapter 9 and just a few more notes on ethics. And then after today, when we're finished with class, I'm going to send the study guide for the final to you guys. And then we're going to have 2 full review sessions before the final exam next Thursday. So the schedule coming up is today, last lecture on chapter 9. Thursday and Tuesday, the next 2 meetings, it's just review sessions. And then next Thursday will be your final exam. Don't forget also that your 4th homework is due this week before midnight on Friday. So just make sure to at least identify like a news show and try to get your notes ready for that and get the assignment completed before the absolute last minute. But yeah, you have until midnight on Friday to finish that. So the only 2 things left for you then is just homework number 4, like I say, that's due Friday, and then the final exam, that's next Thursday. I sent off a notice on, I think, Sunday night, just saying that if you're curious about the grades you've received on any of the earlier assignments, or for example, quiz 3 and homework 3, you can email me. Some of you probably have done that, and I've just been really bogged down these past couple days, to be fair, with a lot of tasks, because there's a little bit of a different schedule at some of the other institutions where I work. Like basically this is finals week for the other campuses that I also teach at. So because they're taking their finals this week, it really does bring upon like a big wave of emails, grading, and proctoring of different exams. So for that reason, it's been a little hard for me to answer all the emails right away, but not to worry. If you have emailed me asking for your grade on any of the other assignments, I'll be right in touch with you either later tonight or at latest in the morning. So just, letting you guys know while we're here together that I'm going to respond to all your email grade requests, and then you're going to have one more homework assignment that's due Friday, and then you have the final. I'm also going to, I'll talk to you about that later. I'm gonna give you guys an opportunity for some very, very easy, like basic extra credit, but I'm gonna announce it after you turn in this next homework. Okay, so if you have any questions about any of those things at all, or anything at all at any point, as usual, feel free to jump in and type out a question, comment, reaction to anything that we're doing in the class or that's coming up on the schedule. Okay, so that's pretty clear then, guys. Just kind of making sure to set the table for the next few meetings now that we're getting close to the end. So just don't forget to turn in that last homework and to take the final. I've noticed sometimes students, at the end of a semester when everything's getting stressful, sometimes your attention or your focus can slip a little bit, and sometimes people do themselves a disservice by not submitting some of the key assignments at the end. So try your best to make sure to complete those things and take the test and submit the 4th homework. Okay. All right, just wanted to open up with that. But if that's all clear, and it's good to see everybody here, guys, whether it's Matthias, Anna, Lan, Danny, Philip, Matt, Elizabeth, Corey, Stephen, welcome back. Okay, so we're talking one more time about chapter 9, and the subject is ethics. First of all, as you guys know, ethics is the study of morality and moral concepts. Questions include like what's right and wrong, good and bad, moral and immoral. When you look at ethics, there's 3 major kinds of actions that are discussed in ethics. There are actions that are claimed to be morally impermissible, which means they're wrong and they're not okay to do. Then there are actions that are morally permissible, and so those are not wrong and they are okay to do. And you have morally obligatory actions. Morally impermissible could be like killing, lying, cheating, or even bigger things, genocide, rape. Morally permissible actions could be anything that's helpful to people, but also things that don't necessarily hurt anybody, whether it's donating, giving canned food to a food drive, or just playing a video game in your house. These are both morally permissible. Then you have morally obligatory actions, which are things that you must do and it'd be wrong not to do them. Here you can consider things like keeping promises, paying for services, maybe not performing any of the impermissible acts. Okay, so when you make reasons, or when you make judgments, I should say, about what's right or wrong or what you should or shouldn't do, they call that moral reasoning. We then talked about different types of values, moral values versus non-moral values. The moral values are those that are beneficial to you and others, but they're also considered good for their own sake, and that has things like justice, forgiveness, altruism, compassion. Then you have non-moral values, which are more self-directed, more goal-oriented, and they're desired as a means to an end. And that kind of includes popularity, fame, wealth, prestige. It's noted that you should have both types of values in your value system if you want to have a complete life and to be as content as you can be. After this, we talked about the conscience. The conscience is just a word that refers to like some kind of internal, innate source of knowledge about what's right and wrong, which can be either nurtured or left to not fully develop in our early life and our moral education. The conscience reveals to us different moral sentiments, which are emotional states that alert us to moral situations and make us want to do the right thing in them. And moral sentiments include things like helper's high, when you help people and feel good, empathy, the ability to imagine and care about the feelings of others, compassion, being able to take actions that produce happiness or that relieve unhappiness, moral tragedy, when you do something that's a moral wrong that you later regret, moral outrage, when you perceive something unjust and then become upset because of it, resentment, when you are the direct victim of some unjust behavior or practice. So it's a little more personal version of moral outrage. And then we talked about the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is a bad feeling that arises from having done something wrong, makes you want to correct the wrong or make amends. Shame is a bad feeling, but it comes not from doing something wrong, but rather from violating some type of social norm or expectation. So it's possible to feel shame with no guilt if you thought that you did something that was not socially approved, but not necessarily immoral either. And then we talked, I guess, about the development of moral reasoning, according to the work of the psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg. So let me just touch base with you for a second here as I'm going over some of this review. Who can tell me or remember what are different stages of moral development as described by Lawrence Kohlberg? So from the Thursday lecture, you would have perhaps notes or memories of that. What are some of the stages of moral development according to that author? Let's see if you can tell me. So who knows like what is the first stage of moral development based on the work of Kohlberg? Let's say what it is or like what its definition is. Hey Remy, good to see you. Let's know though if anyone can help out the first stage of moral development. Okay, good, Oliver. You got all three: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Can I ask somebody to expand a little bit on the first one and we'll go through them? Okay, so there you are, Nathan. Good. Pre-conventional, morality is just about avoiding punishment. Yeah, so that's the first stage, the first earliest kind of most basic stage of moral thought. When you're dealing with little kids or some relatively unsophisticated adults, they might think that morality is really nothing other than being held accountable, being called out, being punished somehow or penalized. And so they don't think much about why it's right to do this or why it's wrong to do it. They just think, I don't want to be in trouble. I don't want to be caught. I don't want to be somehow set back in terms of my self-interest. So the pre-conventional level of moral thinking is all about me, me, me. I don't really care about other people, but I don't want to get punished either. So I'll fall in line with what the moral standards are assumed to be, but only out of a fear of my own liability to punishment. Now, the second stage is conventional. And it's kind of like a reversal of pre-conventional. Now the person is trying to fit into norms and standards in order to meet social approval. So it goes kind of from like a fear of punishment to a desire and longing for social acceptance and fitting in. So at the conventional stage, you're going to follow social conventions, customs, and rules in order to fit in with society's standards and to be judged or perceived somehow in a positive way, like as a nice good boy or a nice girl. But finally then, if you get to that third moral stage, they call it post-conventional. And they say that here, the person they adopt universal moral principles that they can then apply to moral situations on their own. And sometimes the application of these universal moral principles will lead someone to conclusions that are even different from the prevailing views of society or the status quo. So you would have had to be a person at the post-conventional level to, like, I don't know, call out a socially accepted injustice at some previous time in history. So, like, during slavery, if you were a powerful advocate for the abolition of slavery, you'd be at the post-conventional level because you would say, in my society, it's normal. But, damn it, it's just wrong, even if the whole society thinks differently. So sometimes we do need to have people willing to lead instead of follow morally, and they have to lead from a perspective about what moral principles there are and what they imply about how we should treat each other. So, okay. After that, our discussion turned to what are some different types of moral theories. And I think that's where we kind of ran out of time. But I want to ask if you can tell me just a few things about what we said. So there's these two major types of moral theory. Does anybody think they can remember or say what these types of moral theory were? Let me know. So I'll just give you a second to tell me. Moral theories. Just takes a second. Sorry, I just had another little window I had to deal with. I'll get right back to you. 1 second. Thank you, guys. Okay. So here we go. Moral relativism and moral universalism. Yes. So there is deontology and consequentialism, Matthias. We'll talk about that, but those are two different types of moral universalist theory. In the broader scope, we can divide between moral universalism and relativism. And then subcategories within universalism do include the things you're mentioning there. But let's talk about moral relativism and moral universalism. Yes. So moral relativism and moral universalism are two major types of moral theory. And Lan, to your point, ethical subjectivism and cultural relativism are two types of moral relativism. So, like, the proper division of concepts is that we have relativism and universalism on two sides. And then if we, like, zoom into relativism, we will see that there's, like, two compartments of it. There's ethical subjectivism and cultural relativism. And I guess to get into your point, Matthias, there is deontology and consequentialism under the universalist heading, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Hi, Brittany, good to see you. Welcome back. So, okay, first of all, what does moral relativism say? Someone let me ask you that. What is the view of moral relativism? Yes, good, Philip. Now, let's follow that with a brief statement of, what these different views are. So what's the standpoint of moral relativism? Where's morality based on, or what is it derived from? Or what is it not based on or derived from? So you just say a word about the relativism stuff. Sorry. What's moral relativism? And once we know that, then I can talk to you about the two types, the ethical subjectivism and cultural relativism. So let me know. Sparkling water giving me hiccups, but it's okay. Yeah, moral relativism. You say the words, you don't know what they mean? Go ahead, tell me. Okay, good. Thanks, Matthias. So morality is what you would write instead of moral. Morality is relative to a person or culture. See, like, morality is a noun, moral is an adjective. So, but anyway, morality is relative to a person or culture, and it can't be broadly applied. One way to put it. I'm really sorry for these hiccups. I feel like I need to hold my breath, but then I can't lecture. So I'm just going to keep going through it, and it'll hopefully stop. Anna, morality is not universal or objective, it's relative, correct. Right, and same to you, Lan. So with moral relativism, the idea is that morality is not a universal thing. It's not like there's just a fact about what's right or wrong. instead it's subjective in a certain sense. Like it might depend on culture, that's cultural relativism, or it might just even depend on like individual personal opinion, and that's ethical subjectivism. So when you think that morality depends on the person's opinion or the culture's standpoint, then that's a type of relativism, but there's these two different versions. One, individual ethical subjectivism, the other, cultural relativism. Now, I think I talked to you guys about what might be seen as a problem with relativism. Can anybody maybe help me understand or remind us what is a possible criticism or objection to moral relativism? Why might a person say, I think moral relativism is bad? Why? Holding my breath. I'm waiting for you though. Just trying to get rid of the hiccups, but I'm still waiting on your typed comment to my question. Why would a person find fault with moral relativism? Just let me see what you think. What's wrong with saying morality is not universal or objective? Yeah, thanks, Anna. I'm sorry. I've actually, all morning I've kind of been having hiccups. I don't know what it is. I think it's because I needed to get more sleep. I was upgrading so late, but whatever. I think it's passing too. But to get back to the question, like ethical subjectivism, let's say specifically. Okay, Nathan, because if morality is relative, then murder could be considered moral in the eyes of the murderer, right? Which, to continue, which is wrong, which is obviously wrong. So some things are like self-evidently wrong no matter what. And on ethical subjectivism, all we can say is, nah, it's just different opinions. One guy's a rapist and he likes it and thinks it's not wrong. And one person finds it disgusting and totally abhorrent. But there's just different opinions. There's no fact whether rape is wrong. That just doesn't sound right. So a lot of people would say that it's a fault and a flaw of ethical subjectivism that it determines morality based on the individual. But don't we have some like weirdo, just deviant, messed up individuals? We don't want to say that they have a standpoint that's valid when they say that like it's okay to kill people or to touch little children or something. So that's an issue with ethical subjectivism of the person that believes in these things. You're no longer able to say, well, they're just wrong. You could just say, well, we have different views. Cultural relativism has a similar type of problem as well. Now, in cultural relativism, if you have a really deviant individual within a culture, well, we can still say they're wrong because they don't determine morality. The social standard does. So if there's like pedophiles walking around out there on the street, and sadly there are some, well, their opinion about what they're doing and whether it's right or wrong doesn't answer the question. The society standard does. And so like in our culture and our society, that's clearly something that's significantly punishable under the law. And so we can say that it's wrong according to our culture, even though there may be individuals that are different from the cultural standard. But it still doesn't go far enough for some because, what if you had a society that, practices human sacrifice, or that executes people who are gay, or that, has slavery? Are we really prepared to say that, well, in that society, that's okay and right? Because it's just their normal, and we have a different normal. For some, anyway, that doesn't sound good because it's felt as a deep intuition that there are some things that are absolutely wrong, and it doesn't matter if a whole culture approves of it. So if you're looking for a more powerful moral standpoint that makes like objective claims, then you would go with moral universalism. And moral universalism, on the contrast against relativism, it says that morality is universal and objective, and that it's the same for all people, places, and times. But what are some different moral universalist theories? Okay, so now that's what's going to really take up the remainder of today's meeting. We're going to talk together about what are some important developed moral theories that are moral universalist theories. Okay, so here are some moral universalist theories, and the first one is called utilitarianism. Okay, one is this, utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, and one of the major authors behind this ethical theory is this man named John Stuart Mill. Now, John Stuart Mill He's a British philosopher of the 19th century, so he lived from 1806 until 1873. And he is kind of credited with being one of the major forefathers of utilitarian ethics. There's one other kind of historical predecessor to him that is sometimes mentioned in these discussions, and that's Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham lived in the 1700s leading into the 1800s, and he's also one of the early figures that developed the theory of utilitarian ethics. But I kind of think of Mill as the one who gets the nod for being the primary exponent of it, because he kind of presents, I think, the most detailed, thorough, and clear version of utilitarian ethics. Okay, so now we've got to know, what does utilitarianism say about right and wrong? Okay, here's the ethical theory's standpoint. In utilitarianism, it says that the right action is whatever creates the most happiness. So basically it says act always to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness for the greatest number of people. Okay, so it says utilitarianism, act always to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness. So greatest amount overall happiness for the greatest number of people. If you're going to live according to this moral philosophy, then here's how you would be advised to act. When you're making decisions about what to do, and you're like, I want to make the right moral decision, utilitarianism would say, okay, consider all the options that are available to you and try and determine which one of them would generate the most overall happiness for the greatest number of people. And whichever one of those actions would do that, you're supposed to simply act that way. So act in accordance with whichever option generates the most overall happiness for the greatest number of people. So the priority and the premise of it is that happiness is good, and we should try to create as much of it as possible for as many people as we can. So in utilitarian thought, you would always be called on to make forward-looking prospective judgments about how much total happiness all of your different available alternatives could yield. And then you simply act in accordance with whichever one would generate the most, according to, your prospective analysis of how much happiness each different action could generate. So it's a consequentialist theory of ethics. That's another piece of terminology. Let me write that here at the top so that you can just see the word. So utilitarianism is a member of a family of theories that are called consequentialist. So consequentialist. It is a consequentialist ethical theory, and what that word refers to is just that it is the consequences of the action that determine its moral status. So consequences are the results that come from the things that you do. Sometimes when people use the term consequences, they think of it simply in the sense of negative consequences. But there could be negative, good, or neutral consequences. It just depends. Let me give you an example. Say that I help someone study for their final, if I was a student. And because I stayed up with them, helping them prepare, they do really well on the test. So that's a good consequence. Because I assisted, a positive consequence is that they did really well and got an A. Or take a different case. I stay up with this person, getting them drunk all night before their final, and because I distracted them, deprived them of sleep, gave them a hangover, they performed really badly on the final and got an F. Now, that's a bad consequence that comes from what I've done. But what I'm trying to explain here is that a consequence doesn't need to be good or bad, it just depends on the case. So as consequentialists, we are directed to always focus on the consequences that will follow from the things that we do, and just try to create the best overall consequences in terms of how much human happiness would be the result. So if you're wondering, why should I accept this theory? Well, Mill tries to persuade. He tries to convince us that it's the right theory by adding a few principles that are supposed to like support it and provide a base of evidence for it. So let me tell you one major principle that Mill uses to try and get people to consider this to be a plausible and correct theory of ethics. It's called the greatest happiness principle. Okay, greatest happiness principle, and here's what that says. It's going to say actions are right, morally right, to the extent that they promote happiness, and actions are wrong to the extent that they promote the reverse of happiness. Okay, so here it says. To the extent that, meaning like insofar as, or to the degree that. And second part. The second part just says that actions are wrong to the extent that they promote the reverse. To the extent that they promote the reverse of happiness. Okay, so what it says here is this. Actions are right to the extent that they promote happiness, okay? And actions are wrong to the extent that they promote that reverse of happiness. Okay, now, you might be thinking, well, what is this word happiness to be interpreted to mean? Because you might think it's so vague and, subjective and not specific, happiness. But maybe you think this, but to utilitarians, there's actually a pretty clear direct meaning of what the word happiness is. And so in the usage of utilitarians, happiness is just equated with pleasure and the absence of pain. So I'm going to put that up here so that you know what they take it to mean. Happiness is just pleasure and the absence of pain. Okay, you've already seen that this is the name of the principle, so I'm going to erase this to create a little space. And just over here, set off to the left, I'll say GHP, so that you know that that's what it's referring to. But now we're going to define also the reverse of happiness below. Okay, so let me ask you this. Just based on the stated definition of happiness being pleasure in the absence of pain, what do you think would be the definition of the reverse of happiness? Because it's going to be something in the reverse of something else. It's just like the contrary of that. So if happiness is pleasure in the absence of pain, then what do you think would be the reverse? It would be something in the absence of something good. So can you fill in the blanks there? What's this definition? It's something in the absence of something else. And you can sort of use the above definition to give you a sense of what I'm gesturing at. So what's the proper, there you go, thanks, Lan. So yes, it's pain in the absence of pleasure. Okay, so now, since happiness is pleasure in the absence of pain, and the reverse of that is pain in the absence of pleasure, now we can see how these terms figure into this greatest happiness principle a little better. What it's saying is that when you do something, the action that you're doing is going to be considered good based on if it's creating pleasure. And the more pleasure that it creates, or the more pain that it takes away, then the better and better morally we think of that action. So like, I don't know, say that some person rushed into a burning building to try and bring people out of there that are in danger of suffocating from smoke or burning to death. They're trapped inside. This person has access to the front door. They don't, so he can rush in, kick the door open, and try to bring them out. Now, suppose he does this, takes a little risk of his own well-being, but ends up getting some people out. Say he saved just one person. If he saved the one, then he prevents the loss of all the future pleasure they would have otherwise experienced, right? So think of all the things that you still want to experience starting now, right? Like you want to maybe graduate, get married, have a family, travel the world, have certain possessions in life, have certain relationships, experiences. If you were to die right now, all that stuff would be just canceled out and you'd never have any of it. So providing for the ability for the individual to continue surviving and have all that additional pleasure, the rescue of the one life would be a very good action. If they save 2, 3, 4 lives, it just seems to compound their moral record and make it seem better and better. Now, what if you're the arsonist? If you're the arsonist who has set the fire, then if it consumes a person in the flames, it's a terrible thing that you did, because not only have you caused them pain, I'm sure, in the act itself, but you've also denied to the individual all the future pleasure they otherwise would have enjoyed had they not died through your action. So it doesn't need to be life and death. It could also be just, something a little lesser on the scale of seriousness. But in general, Mill believes it attracts with our everyday common sense. When people in the world create pleasure for people or take their pain away, like you perform a successful surgery on someone so they no longer have a disability, that is something judged to be good. And when you go into the world and you cause pain for people, or you take their current pleasure away from them, that's wrong. And the more of that you do, the worse it is. And this just expresses that it's a matter of degree, like to the extent that the more happiness created or whatever, the better. Or the more reverse of happiness created, the worse. Now, as even further justification for this here principle, one second, let me just do something in my other window. One second, guys. Yeah, so there's another principle here that is going to further provide justification for this. And let me go ahead and write it now. So if you're wondering, why is happiness and pleasure so prioritized? Like, why is that the standard that we should be always judging our actions according to morally? Mill gives a reason. He says, the reason that happiness and pleasure take center stage in this ethical theory is because if you think about it, that's the only thing in the whole world that any of us is pursuing as an end and not as a means. I'll write the statement here and then we'll discuss it together, okay? So he says happiness, and since happiness and pleasure are the same for him, I'm going to just write happiness/pleasure because it's like the same. Happiness or pleasure is the only thing that we all pursue as an end and not as a means. Blue marker's not doing so well, sorry for that. So anyway, happiness, pleasure, the only thing that we pursue as an end and not as a means. Okay, so the statement above says happiness, pleasure, same, is the only thing that we pursue as an end and not as a means. And that's why he thinks it's fair to make it the kind of center stage concept of this theory. Now, for us to break this down, we have to think together about what the words means and end refer to. So let me ask you if you think you can say what is an end and what is a means. Maybe I can direct you to it by referring to this common phrase. So one expression that is sometimes well known is the statement that the ends justify the means. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard this or if you have some type of familiarity with the phrase, but if you think you could, can anybody take a chance to tell me what do you think it means in other words when a person says the ends justify the means? What is that statement really saying? Can you tell me about what that means to you in a little slightly different way? The ends justify the means. Just take a minute, but let me know what you really think that's supposed to signify. It's a common enough phrase, so maybe it's something that you can that you would understand. Ends justify the means. Go ahead. Just let me know. Even if you have a very dim understanding or a guess, I'm happy to hear it. Ends justify the means. What do you think that statement means? Okay, so here you say, Philip, it doesn't matter how we achieve a goal as long as we achieve it. Kind of, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it does mean. So if that's the way we sort of understand it, then let me follow up with you. So if the ends justify the means refers to the idea that it doesn't matter how you achieve a goal as long as you achieve it, then what is the end? And here's what you say, Matthias, that whatever brings the desirable outcome, happiness in a moral situation, is justifiable no matter how abhorrent it seems. Okay, good, good. So now I want to drill down onto the two words themselves. So if the ends justify the means says, like, when you have a goal and if it's important enough, whatever you got to do to get there, it becomes okay, then what does the specific word end refer to? Like, what is an end in general? An end, you guys have put it sort of in different ways. I've kind of also said it just now. But what would you say is the definition simply of the one word end in this usage? Not like, like the end of a movie or something, but in the moral sense, in the philosophical sense, an end is a what? Since Philip and Matthias have already sort of given the right explanation, you should be able to tell me what you think the word end means. Just look at your own definition. Okay, well, you say the consequence. Sort of, but I would rather use a slightly different word because consequence just might be what happens. But an end is what you would like to happen. And same to you, Lan. You say a result or an outcome, but an end is a desired outcome. So what's the word for a desired consequence or a desired result? A desired outcome. Philip, a little too specific. I'm not asking what the end is, but what the concept of an end is. Okay? And so these others are getting to that. You're saying it's a result or an outcome. I'm just trying to add one little element. What is a desired outcome? Because, I could say I took a test and failed and that was the outcome, but that wasn't my goal, right? So there you go, exactly. It's a goal. It's a goal or it's an objective, whichever word you want to pick because they're kind of the same. So an end, I'll just put it in the chat. Ends are goals or objectives. Okay, good. Now, what are the means overall in general towards the end? If the end is the goal, and they sometimes say the ends justify the means, then what are the means in relationship to the goal? The means are the what about the goal. So the end is the goal, and the means are the things that what? So just tell me what are means based on this current breakdown of the phrase ends justify the means. So the goals justify the what? The goals, the objectives, justify the things that you do to get to the goal. Exactly, yes. So that's what a means is, and I'll write it in the chat also. Means. They are just actions taken or methods used to achieve one's goals. Okay, so actions taken to achieve goal, that's what a means is, and you say the same, Matthias, the means are the actions that will bring you closer to your goal. All right, good. Now that we have a full-blown understanding of means and ends, we can return to the greatest happiness principle. Oh, sorry, we can return to this auxiliary piece of support that we have above. What it says, in other words, is that happiness or pleasure is the one and only thing that we're looking for as a goal. So that really is it, that happiness and pleasure is the only goal that any of us have. It is the 100% goal of every action. Nothing else is a goal. Only happiness and pleasure. Everything else that you want, if you want it, is desired not as a goal, but as a means to this attainment of pleasure down the line. Okay? And so what Mill is arguing is that if happiness and pleasure is the supreme goal of every single thing that every human ever does, that means that we all recognize in our own behavior already that happiness and pleasure is the good. And therefore, why not maximize it and make more of it? If it's the good, then more of it is better rather than less. Now, if it doesn't sound to you, at least maybe immediately intuitive to say that happiness and pleasure is the only goal of all human actions, then let me try to make it seem plausible to you by just walking you through your own situation right now. Okay, so one thing you're doing right now is watching this lecture on critical thinking for your class at OCC. So you must be doing this for some reason. Like, what is the goal in mind for you to watch this lecture? I mean, this lecture that you're watching is a means to something. And you can tell me, what goal do you have behind even watching this right now? Like, what are you trying to get to? If you watch this lecture, which you are, then I guess you're thinking it's a means to something. Otherwise, why would you be doing it? So what is the, the reason, the goal that you have behind even doing this? Because if you didn't have a reason or a goal in mind, why would you do it? So you'll tell me now, why are you watching this lecture? Why? What do you want? What do you like? What's the point? Why are you doing this? All of a sudden you're like, wow, I've never asked these questions. Like, why am I doing anything? I mean, really, think about it. No, but seriously, why are you watching this lecture? Just tell me. This is not it's not a philosophical question. It's just a straightforward, real question. Okay, so Nathan, let's go step by step. I like you adding that to the chat. So you say to get college credits and to complete your degree. Okay, good. So let's say you watch this lecture, and by watching it you think, which is true, that you'll probably have a better chance to perform well in the class by taking in the lectures, okay, and attending them. So you attend as a means to success in the class. And you want to do well in the class, but as a means to another goal, like what you're saying, Nathan. You want to do well in this class because I guess it will help you get credits, and you want the credits because the credits will help you to attain either transfer or a degree. So if you're in this class, you're taking this lecture in as a means to doing well in the class, as a means to transfer or graduation. But let me stop right there. Why do you want to graduate? You're saying you're in this class right now as a means of graduation. But graduation is not the end goal either. Like, why do you want to graduate? You just want to stand up there with the hat and robe and gown on and like, you're like, I'm done. I have no other goals. No, you want to graduate. I understand. That's why you're here. But why do you want to graduate? As a means to something else. What's the reason that you want to get a graduation status? I think you could probably tell me that. I mean, here you are in college, and this is a class. So why do you want to graduate college? Okay, so you're saying to get a job, Philip. Nice. Okay, I agree. You probably want to graduate because having the degree places you in better position to, take on certain careers and positions. But why do you want to get a job? I mean, you just like labor? You're just like labor, work. It's what I've always wanted, just working for people. To be honest with you, I don't really like work. But I think you want to work as a means, though, for something. Like, why do you want a job? Can you tell me why you want to be put to work and to have to work? You want the job, and you want the job as a means to something. Why do you want a job? Because you don't want the job for its sake itself. I mean, like, even me, I love philosophy, but I would not do this for free. So yeah, there you go, to make money. We're almost to the end, but I just have 1 or 2 questions left. Well, why do you want to have money? And well, I guess, Nathan, you're like kind of fast forwarding to the end. You want money because, okay, it'll make you happy. But I was going to take it step by step. So if I say you want money, okay, I'm sure you do. But why do you even want money? Because money allows you to purchase things, right? Money gives you the ability, not just food land. I mean, that's a little funny, but you're being facetious. You don't want just to eat, because you could even get food stamps or something and you'd still be able to eat. You want money to have purchasing power for goods and services and financial security. But why do you want to be able to expend money on goods and services and to have the financial security of knowing that it's in your bank? Why do you want that? You say to buy your needs and wants. Well, yes. But having those needs and wants will make you feel how? Like, why do you want to be able to satisfy your needs and wants? What is it that you want wealth and money for? You say to buy things, but why do you want to be able to buy them? Why do you want to be able to buy these things? When you talk about survival, you're kind of getting off the track. It's just because you want to be happy, right? You want to be happy, you want to be pleased. And, if I ask you now, why do you want happiness? It's okay at that point to shrug your shoulders and be like, what? I mean, come on, that's just it. There's nothing else to say. It's just happiness is a brute fact that we all want. And everything we're doing is towards the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so even though sometimes you're doing things that don't necessarily seem like fun in the moment, you're working out really hard, you're getting sore, it's like very strenuous, but you like the end results that come from it, the happiness that comes from getting into that fit condition. And in the same way you study in school and you kind of sometimes, you get tough criticisms from your professors and you stress out trying to learn the stuff. But if you get the degree at the end, you're willing to do that because you think that's going to provide for your happiness later. So if you really think about it, guys, right? Just look at what we've said. You're in this class as a means to passing it, as a means to graduating, as a means to getting a job, as a means to getting money, as a means to buying stuff, and you want to be able to buy the stuff because you think that'll make you happy. Now, if you didn't think that this would make you happy, I guarantee you would stop right now. And there are some people that make a different decision, right? Some people say, look, school's just going to saddle me with a lot of debt. I'd rather just have experiences, travel, hang out with my friends, party a lot. I don't care about learning all that stuff or even having a job. Some people will take that path through life because they think that their happiness will lead in that direction. And, you've made a different decision, which is good, I think. But in the end, we all agree on one thing at least, that we're seeking happiness and pleasure. It might not be that we find happiness and pleasure in the exact same things. You know, like if there's a guy that's going to jump out of a plane right now and skydive, he might say that was the most fun he ever had. If it was me, I might be like, that was the worst experience, the most terrifying experience. I wish I could never, ever do that again, and it's giving me nightmares. So now I have PTSD. But look, even if we're different, we both want pleasure. We just find it in different things. You know, maybe what I find pleasure in, he would find boring or stupid, and maybe vice versa. So Mill is just expressing the point here that happiness and pleasure is already the only thing that any of us wants at the end of the day. You know, and so if happiness is the one and only thing that every single person is seeking, personal happiness, then Mill says that must be the good, and therefore more of it rather than less is the right way to think about morality and your ethical life. Okay, so we're all in the pursuit of happiness, and you know that's why he thinks maximization of happiness for the greatest number of people is the proper moral theory, because he's like, I'm not telling you that this is true. You already accept this based on your own behavior. If you just look at your own behavior, you're drawn towards the pursuit of personal happiness. Okay, now, what I sometimes like to do next is to just try and provide like a little example of a choice situation where the theory of utilitarianism could be applied. And that shows you maybe how it could be like used in reality, like in practice. So let's see here. Yeah. I'm going to draw a box so we can add this to our notes. Just a little box figure. Even though I wish I had a better marker, so I got to get some new ones. Okay, now here's a box. We're going to create, let's say, 4 vertical columns by drawing these vertical lines through it. And then we're going to also cross it with 4 horizontal rows. So now we have a grid here of 16 boxes. Okay, now in the top 4, above the top 4 vertical columns, I'm going to place 4 different types of pizza toppings that are just well known that people can refer to. So someone tell me what's one well-known type of pizza. We're talking pizza now. So what's one of them? Call out one of your faves, and well, or just anyone. It doesn't have to be one of your favorites, but just something memorable, a type of pizza topping. Once I have 4, I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4 right there. With your help. Okay, so Jordan, you say pepperoni. Okay. So P here stands for pepperoni, right? Now, what's another one? Pineapple. Well, pineapple and pepperoni both have the letter P, so it's going to mess it a little bit up, but whatever. I'll put it over here so it's not confusing. P-I for pineapple. Now, I also see cheese and I see mushrooms, so I'm just going to put those in there too. So C for cheese, M for mushroom, and then this is pineapple. Sorry, this is pepperoni, this is pineapple. Okay, now, truffles. Okay, we're getting pretty exotic, but let's just stick with the 4 we have. Now, over here in the 4 left horizontal rows, I want to just add 4 different students' names from this class. And so all you got to do is simply volunteer to tell me a little bit about your feelings on these types of pizzas, and it'll be very easy for you to do that. So just let me know if I can put some people's names here. To whom may I write the names on this board? Just need 4 of you guys. I mean, I could do it without any volunteers, but it's a little more fun and more real when we have some actual participation. So, okay, thanks, Philip. You'll be one of them. Here's Philip's name. But we need 3 others. Okay, so who's next? Okay, thanks, Matt and Remy. Also you. Here's Matt's name. Remy. And let's see. Okay, Oliver or Nathan. I don't know. Nathan, I guess your name's first as I scrolled, so I'll put you here. Okay, so we have Philip, Matt, Remy, and Nathan. Now look at the boxes. Each box assigns a name to a pizza selection. So like this box, for example, would be Matt Mushroom, right? Because that's where they intersect on the grid. Now what I'm going to do is ask you guys, the 4 of you, to simply give me a rating of the different 4 options here. And just to kind of keep us to a simple range, I want you to make the scoring between 0 and 50. Now, this is going to stand for the amount of pleasure that you think you would experience if this was the choice of pizza topping that was made. So like, If you like something twice as much as something else, that should be reflected in the numeric score, like you give it twice the value in points. So these are like pleasure points. I don't know, it's the amount of pleasure, if it could be somehow converted into a number, that you would feel if this was the choice made. So I need you right now, the 4 that are on the board, to look at these 4 things and start thinking how you would rate them going, 0 through 50. I sometimes see people online and internet, talk about 10 for 10 would recommend. This is not exactly like that, but it's kind of like that because you're going to tell me how much out of 50 this would generate pleasure for you. So if it's like no pleasure, I guess that's 0. If it's your favorite of all and you really love it, it's 50, but there could be things in the middle. Maybe you find all of them kind of boring and they're all in the middle. But that's your decision and it's your preference, which is unique to you. So starting with Philip, just take a moment to think, but let me hear 4 numbers assigned to each of the 4 types right there. So go ahead whenever you're ready. Let me see what your values would be. Sorry, 1 second. I have this other window that I gotta close, so it'll just be 1 second. I'm multitasking because I have this other group of people over here. Like I say to you guys, I have some students that are turning things in all week because their finals and stuff are this week, so it's like I have to attend to them. Okay, so thank you, Philip. 35, 20, 10, 50. 35, 20, 10, and then 50. So you're a pineapple lover, which is already going to set off some people's, trigger some people's rage or hostility, but that's fine. Okay, so for you, Philip, it's pineapple all the way. That's your favorite. If you had a second choice, you'd go with pepperoni. Then you're looking at cheese and maybe mushroom. You don't like that much. Little pleasure, but not much. Okay, fair enough. So next up, Matt. To you, if we're talking to Matt, what's the deal with 4 types of pizza here? Give us those ratings, pleasure scores, or whatever you want to call those. So Matt, let me know. And then while you're doing that, Matt, to the other 2, Remy and Nathan, you can also let me hear yours. So I'll just write the ones that appear first. Okay, Remy, you say 15, 32, 49, and 8. Okay. 15, oh, sorry, that's not Matt, Remy. 15, 32. Let me get to the third one, 49, and then for you it was pineapple 8. Least favorite. Matt, now you're saying 20, 50, 25, 40. And then to Nathan, we've got 15, 15, 50, 50. Okay. All right, so the grid's filled. And now think about it as a utilitarian would. If you were a utilitarian and you're put in the situation to try and choose the topping, say there's only these 4 options, right? You would want to make the choice that would generate the most overall pleasure for the whole group affected by the choice. So that means we simply have to do a little basic math. We have to do some addition. We're going to add the 4 columns, and you're going to see a sum at the bottom of each 4 columns. And that number is going to represent the total quantity of pleasure that action would result in if it was the one chosen by the decision maker. So let's just check my math if I'm wrong. Remy, go through in some values that I'll have to bust out my calculator for, but no. 35, 30, 65, 85. That's the total for this one, okay? So 70, 102, 107, 117 here. Okay, 35, 85, 125, 134. I'm going to do that twice. 35, 85, 125 is 40 more plus 9. Okay, 134. And then here, 50, 50, 100, and 148. Because, yeah. Okay, so if this is the way that the breakdown of preferences happens, let me make sure this is easily legible because I kind of didn't write it perfectly. 148. Okay, now if this is the breakdown of the distribution of utility for each option, then we have a clear winner. Can anybody tell me what's the moral obligation in this scenario? for the person to choose which one and why. Just trying to apply this to a scenario that's simple enough. But we can say now that if it was Philip, Matt, Remy, and Nathan ordering pizza at a place where there's just these 4 choices and there's no split toppings or anything, then the right thing to do morally would be to order which one? Just let me know. What's the result? You're looking at a graph. Pineapple, right, because it gives the most pleasure for the most people. Pineapple pizza, yes, because it dominates the others in terms of generating a greater total yield of overall pleasure. So I put an asterisk right here to signify that this one's like, they sometimes call this optimific, the choice that maximizes utility within one's options. This is the optimific choice. The other 3, aside from it, do not generate as much total pleasure for the group. So by comparison, these are morally impermissible in this case, and this is morally obligatory. You're duty-bound, obligated morally to pick this because it results in a greater overall balance of pleasure minus pain for the whole group affected. Now, is every person in this group happy with the result? Not necessarily. Matt, for example, and even Remy are both a little disappointed because, let's say, especially Remy, this is your least favorite pizza. But I guess duty calls in this case, taking one for the team, as they say. Because in utilitarianism, your moral obligation is to do whatever generates the most utility or happiness for everyone affected. And if that is inconsistent with your preferred outcome, you're supposed to set your preference aside to do what's going to generate more happiness for all. Because again, if Remy gets her favorite, it's going to be less optimific for all. Matt, for you, cheese is your favorite. I guess you don't necessarily mind pepperoni too much, or sorry, pineapple too much because it's like second place. But for you anyway, this does represent a slight concession on your preferred outcome because you're getting the second favorite one. But never mind that, because in utilitarianism, you're supposed to do whatever creates the most happiness for all. Now, there are other types of consequentialist theory that have different rules and parameters. Another consequentialism is called hedonism. I'll just write the word one time in the chat. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but hedonism is the view that the right action is whatever creates the most utility or happiness, but just for you, the individual. So if you're like the hedonist, Matt, I don't know what you would do. You'd probably be like, I'm sorry, guys, but we can't chill because I'm not going to be able to enjoy this pizza that makes everyone else a little happier. But yeah, in hedonism, you simply do the thing that's best for number one, for just you. The thing, though, about hedonism is it's kind of relegated to the margins. No one takes it too seriously as a serious ethical theory because it sounds like an open invitation to just live a selfish life that ignores everyone else's needs and interests. And to be fair, a lot of people do live like that. But ethics is supposed to be about how you ought to act if you're morally enlightened, not just how people already have a tendency to act before they receive any kind of moral instruction at all. So hedonism is out there. It's consequentialist because it's based on consequences, but it's just based on consequences to you instead of to all affected. Now, I chose the case of pizza toppings here because it's kind of trivial and it's not too very weighty. It's not life and death, war and peace. It's not a big decision in a way with a lot of consequences or a lot of, I guess, not much riding on it. But if you really were a utilitarian-minded person, then you would apply the same type of calculation to every choice, even those that do have a huge degree of stakes. Say that you were like a utilitarian legislator and a bill came before you, and the bill says legalize marijuana in the United States, right? If you're a utilitarian legislator, you would have to consider both possible outcomes, one where the bill is passed, one where the bill is defeated, and then you would have to judge which status quo would create more total happiness for society, considering all of the contingencies and results that would follow from it. And based on which one you thought would be the more overall happy status quo, you would vote in accordance with that. Sometimes even actions that are hugely destructive of life can be justified according to utilitarian moral reasoning, as long as the alternative to that action is even worse. And this is sometimes what are called necessary evils. That's sometimes subject to criticism by opponents of utilitarianism, but they don't necessarily find it a flaw. So take the case of dropping the atomic bombs on Japan in World War II after the United States was attacked in the Pearl Harbor. Some people, of course, don't agree with the morality of that, but a utilitarian moral justification can be given. You could say that, well, even though 100,000 people died instantly, it's a hugely destructive weapon, If that had not been done, the argument goes, then the war would have continued on indefinitely long against a dedicated enemy that's not willing to surrender. And maybe that would have necessitated a longer conflict, a more drawn-out conflict, the use of ground forces, which could have ultimately produced more deaths on both sides. Even though the one very destructive event in the short term killed a lot of people, you might have thought that on balance, the alternative would have been even worse for everyone affected on both sides. So that shows you that whether it's pizza toppings or like decisions of war and peace, whether to drop atomic bombs, all of these things can be made according to utilitarian moral principles. And that's one of the major competitors, I guess, in the space of moral philosophy is utilitarianism. So again, if you wanted to try and apply this way of thinking to your ethical decisions, you would try and estimate how much total happiness each of your different alternative actions could create. And then you would try to just act along the lines of whichever one would generate the most. Sometimes people don't like utilitarianism because it can be argued that the ends justify the means in some cases. Like, what's to stop a person from stealing from the rich and giving to the poor if it generates more total happiness? You know, so a lot of times people find fault with it, but it's one of the big theories. Okay, now a different moral theory then, so I can clear the board away of this, and sort of like another major rival, the main theoretical rival to utilitarianism is the philosophical ideas of Immanuel Kant. So I'll just say a little bit about him. So here's the guy's name, Immanuel Kant. And he was a German philosopher who lived from 1724 until 1804. Now, Kant's moral philosophy is not based on consequences at all, so it's not, as we called it, consequentialist. Instead, his moral framework assumes that we should just follow the moral law from a sense of duty, and we should do that regardless of the consequences, whether they be good, bad, or something in between. Our obligation is to follow the moral law, even if doing that does not always make everybody happy. Okay, so like, how can we discover the moral law? Well, Kant says that there is actually an objective moral law that reason can discover. Reason, which he says could be given to us by God or just naturally developed by nature, is something that humans have. It's the same tool that we use to develop principles of physics, mathematics, chemistry. It's what's enabled us to develop all the amazing technology that we have as human beings. So Kant thought, anyway, that that same source of reason can also be used to determine the moral law and what its principles are. And he said that when you use your reason to figure out the moral law, you will utilize this principle that is kind of like the core of his whole ethics, which is called the categorical imperative. So I'm going to write up for you on the board what's called the categorical imperative, which is supposed to be the method by which reason can discover and ascertain the moral law, what the moral law commands and what the moral law forbids. Okay, so here's the categorical imperative, linchpin kind of center stage principle in Kant's philosophy. Just like the greatest happiness principle was the core of Mill's utilitarianism, the categorical imperative is kind of like the centerpiece here. Okay, now the categorical imperative is expressed in a couple of different versions. At least two prominent versions are often mentioned in the literature. I'm just going to try to talk to you about the one that I think is the most central, and it's this. So it says, act always so that your maxim could be willed to be a universal law. Okay, so let me write that here. Act always so that the maxim, well, let me put it this way. I want to save myself some words. Act always so that your maxim could be willed to be a universal law. Okay, so a couple points here that have to be clarified. What is a maxim? What does it mean for a maxim to be able to be willed as a universal law? Okay, now first of all, a maxim is just kind of like a technical philosophy word for a person's policy of action. So it's like the individual's policy of action when they do something deliberate. For example, looking at my own current situation, I'm teaching you this lecture right now. And I could say, here's my maxim. This is like my policy behind what I'm doing. So it's a statement like, I will teach lecture at the duly scheduled time according to my contract. That's what I'm doing. I'm teaching this lecture right now because this is the appointed time under my contract. Now, when you consider the maxim as a universal law, you simply have to do the following. You have to like upgrade it to a statement that replaces a reference to me and substitutes a statement about what all people will do. So you basically restate the principle as like a law for everybody. So if I say I will hold lecture when class is scheduled based on my contract, the universal law version would be all professors will hold their class at the duly scheduled time. Now, if that was the universal law, there would be no problem with that. It would just mean that your professors would reliably hold classes at the time and date that they're assigned, and that would not be a problem at all. So that passes the bar of morality, and it's not wrong. But the interesting cases are cases where we have maxims that are bad, that could not be universal laws, and that's where Kant says that reason is telling you that that's forbidden and it's wrong. So like here's some examples. One Kant gave himself, okay? So suppose that I want to borrow money, and I know that the only way the person will ever give me the borrowing of the money is if I promise to pay it back. But suppose that I'm like a scoundrel and I have no desire to pay it back. At the same time, I can't just tell him, look, give me money for free. So I make my mind up to lie and make a false promise to repay a loan, okay? In order to just get the loan, and then after that, I'm gonna just never pay it. So in that case, the maxim of a person that's requesting the loan would be this: I will lie about repaying a loan whenever I want money. Now, if that was the universal law, what would it say? It would say that all people that request loans will lie in order to get the loan generated. But if that was the universal law, if it was the rule instead of the exception to lie about repaying loans, then lenders would not give the loans because they would know that it's 100% of people in these cases who always lie about requesting the loan and paying it back. And so if that was the rule, then the loan you're asking for would not be given to you because it would be understood that the rule rather than the exception is non-repayment. Okay, so does the person that's making this false promise of repayment want everybody literally to do the same thing they're doing? No, because if it was done by all, then their lie would not escape detection because it would be known as a lie rather than assumed to be true given the fact that most people keep their promises to repay. So long story short, it's not possible for you to do this. It's not possible for everybody to do this and for lending to still exist. Therefore, reason's telling you something. Stop doing that, it's wrong. You can tell it's wrong because it's not possible for that to be applied as a universal law or practice. Here's another example, just to go off cases. Suppose someone's going to take a free ride on the subway, so they hop the turnstile, don't pay the fare, and just ride for free. The free rider, what would be the maxim? Well, I will not pay for a ride on the subway when I want to use it. That's the maxim. So if this is a universal law, it would be the statement that all passengers will not pay when they ride the subway. But if that was the case, then there would be no longer any funding for the subway and it could no longer operate. And under those circumstances, the free rider would not have a subway system to take a ride on for free. So do they want everybody to ride for free like them? Again, no. Because if everybody did so, the system, which depends on some people paying into it, would not function, and therefore they couldn't even have a free ride. If you're waiting in a long line and you're getting impatient because you're far back in the line, so you think to cut, and your maxim is, I will cut when there's a long line. Convert that into a universal law and you see it doesn't work. All people will cut when there's a long line does not work because if everybody cuts, there's no longer any line to cut. And furthermore, the cutter, him or her, would not even benefit from 100% cutting rate because as soon as they cut, every other member of the line would cut right in front of them and it'd just be a mess. So even though it looks a little complex and technical, maxim, universal law, it's really saying something simple. It's just saying that it's only okay to do actions that it would be possible and not undesirable for everybody to do as well. So if you're doing something where you're creating an exception to the rule for yourself, and you realize that it would not be practical or possible for everyone to do the same, then you're doing something wrong. When you're riding alone in the carpool lane to get there faster, you know already that if everybody acted the same way, then this carpool lane would no longer be expedited because it would be just as full as the other traffic lanes, and thus it's wrong. Okay, so Kant says just stick to the categorical imperative and you'll be living a good moral life, even though sometimes doing what the categorical imperative requires you to do won't generate the most happiness, right? So like maybe telling a false promise to get the loan would have made you happy, but it violates the moral principle of the categorical imperative. So that's, you can see cases where utilitarians and Kantians would disagree. Okay, now from there, I wanted to just quickly finish up our meeting today with a couple of last leftover items about ethics in the textbook. One of these words, an important ethical concept that's indicated after the work of Kant, is the idea of rights, okay? And so some people who discuss ethics and morality think that rights is like a very important concept. And there's generally two different types of rights that are mentioned in ethics. Okay, so two types of rights. So there are what are known as liberty rights, and on the other hand, welfare rights. Liberty rights and welfare rights. So let me define the first above. Liberty rights are rights to be left alone to pursue your legitimate interests. Okay. Okay, so these are rights to be left alone to pursue those legitimate interests. Now, welfare rights are rights to be given certain things that might be deemed essential for your survival if you can't provide them for yourself. So, rights to be provided certain essential goods. If you can't provide them yourself. Okay, now, just looking at those two definitions, I'm going to see if you can follow this question. So suppose that we say you have a right to freedom of speech. This is one of the constitutional rights in our Bill of Rights. So people talk about the freedom of speech, but which kind would that be? Would it be a liberty right or a welfare right? Would it be a right that says you're to be left alone to pursue these interests, or would it be a right which says you're to be given certain things if you don't have the ability to get them on your own? So with the freedom of speech, basically, is it a liberty or welfare right? What do you think? Let me know. Which type? Yes, it's a liberty right, Nathan, because to have the freedom of speech just means that you may not be interfered with or silenced in the free expression of your views or opinions by the state. It doesn't mean that you're to be given anything like a bullhorn or something. It just means that you're not to be silenced or interfered with. So that's a liberty right. What about a right to practice one's religion, freedom of religion? That is also a liberty right, because it doesn't mean that you are to be given anything. Not that any kind of religion is endorsed or anything, but rather that you may not be interfered with or set back in the free exercise or practice of your chosen religion by the state. What about if I say you have a right to, let's say, education or healthcare? What would that be? To have a right to healthcare or a right to education, as some say you do have, would it be a liberty or welfare right? Human right to healthcare, human right to education, these would be in what camp, liberty or welfare? It is a welfare right, yes, Philip, because if, say, we think that you have a right to healthcare, that means if you're not capable of providing your own healthcare, then there must be some kind of system that society institutes which can provide it for you. Same with education, right? Public education. If you don't have the means on your own to afford, private education or whatever, then the state must establish some system that members of society can enter into, because it's an essential need of members of society to be educated or to have, let's say, healthcare. If you believe in those rights. If I say that you have a right to food and water or housing or something, that would be another welfare right, because in case you're not able to attain your own food, water, or whatever, We think that as a human being you have a right to it, so there must be some kind of mechanism to distribute it to people that are not otherwise able to get it. Don't think, though, that welfare rights are only for the poor, destitute, or unproductive members of society. Take the case of like military and police protection. You're not capable of providing for your own common defense against some of our international adversaries, and so we must institute a system of common defense that can provide for that essential need that we have as well. Okay, so liberty rights could be like a freedom to own a gun, the Second Amendment. That doesn't mean that you have a right to be given a gun, but that you have a right not to have it taken away or have your ownership challenged by the state if we think that's like a valued right. So these are rights to be given things if you can't get them. And these are rights to, like, these are kind of like the don't tread on me rights. Don't interfere with me as I say what I want to do, or as I own a weapon, or as I practice whatever religion I want. So there's that breakdown and division between the concept of rights. Welfare rights to be provided certain essential goods, liberty rights to be non-interfered. And then the last thing I want to say about, I guess, Chapter 9 is the topic of virtue. What is a virtue? A virtue is just a desirable character trait. So I'm going to put it in the chat. Virtue, a desirable character trait. So think of like qualities that you would normally say to somebody that you think is the subject of moral praise. So good character traits like patience, generosity, courage, intelligence, resourcefulness, dedication. So like the kind of things that are compliments. If you say them about a person, this is such a good, like a morally good person. This is such a good person because they have good charisma. They're so dedicated, hardworking, kind, generous, and brave. So some people think that what you should focus on in your moral life is just trying to cultivate these virtues in your character. Try to be the generous person. Try to be the kind, brave, charming person that would be assigned these virtues in the description. It's hard sometimes to know what it is to have these virtues and how to build them up, but the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle said that we should just try to imitate those that we think of as examples of virtue. In the Christian tradition, sometimes they say, like, what would Jesus do or whatever, but whether you're a believer in that religion or not, if you can identify some person that you think of as like a role model who exhibits a given virtue, then the virtue theory would say try and emulate their behavior until it becomes a habit of second nature. And now you will be one of those paradigms that other people try to imitate going forward. So that's really about it, guys. I think I've taught you all I wanted to teach when it comes to ethics in Chapter 9. So for that reason, I guess we're pretty much good and clear on all the notes. I'm going to send you the study guide for the final in the next couple hours here, so you can start looking at it. And we're going to use that to prepare for the final in the next 2 class meetings. We'll just look at the study guide. Other than that, please let me know if you have any grade requests or anything, and I'll be answering them through the week. Sorry if I couldn't get to them yet, but it's been a bit of a hectic few days just getting my other class finals out of the way and all of that. But if everything's good to go, then just let me know in the chat that you're good, and then I'll close our stream, and we'll see each other back on Thursday for just the beginning of the review sessions. So are we all right? Let me know. Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot, Ryan. Thanks for everybody else that's here. I appreciate you guys sticking it out to the end. Semester's sometimes a marathon. It's not a sprint, so it's important to try and really focus and not lose focus at the end. But I'm glad that you guys are doing well with it. So for the time being anyway, have a good couple days. I'll be in touch, and I'll see you on Thursday. Okay, bye-bye.